Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host, Sana Maqbool, with you at PTV World. In today's show, what we're going to be looking at is two very important stories. The first is with reference to what is going on in the country economically, the kind of challenges that we have seen in the past also, and then, of course, what the country has been facing. Unfortunately, the people at large have been dealing with the increase in prices, including that of petrol and electricity. And it seems that this is something that is adding to the already troubled nation. And of course, the government is also restricted in its options available given the standby arrangement with the IMF and the way that it needs to move forward with these tough decisions. However, the caretaker finance minister earlier in a press conference did paint a slightly more positive picture, saying that a lot of the indicators are moving towards the positive direction, and at least there is the way forward that has been set by the caretaker government. And whether or not the IMF is part of the equation, what she's interested in is to make sure that there is economic stability in the country, which includes a lot of the measures and steps that need to be taken, including, of course, the increase in tax collection. And then, of course, she also was appreciative of the fact that the exchange rate stabilized despite any intervention by the State Bank. So we're going to be taking a further look at the kind of impact that the finance minister highlighted, including that of bringing in more investment in the country, the role of the SIFC so far, and the role of the Asian Development Bank and other possibilities of more money coming in within the country, and whether or not these are going to be enough given the short-term or more immediate-term scenario. We're also going to be looking at the government's announcement regarding moving towards a digital currency, which seems to be something that the State Bank has already done its groundwork for, and whether or not this is going to be a move that is going to be easy, that is going to be helpful, and how soon can we see this actually materializing into something that will impact the economy positively. Furthermore, of course, we're going to be taking a look at the political situation and the impact that that's going to have on the finances of the country, including the upcoming general elections, and then, of course, the kind of reviews that are also in place within the standby arrangement, and what sort of decisions and the kind of measures the government will have to take despite the number of challenges that it may pose to the general public in the coming months. That is going to be the focus of our first segment of the show today. Our next one is going to take a look at a report that has been published by The Intercept, a US-based publication, that talks about Pakistan's a secret arms deal with the US, in which it was decided that Pakistan will be providing arms to Ukraine. In exchange of that, it has been claimed that the IMF standby arrangement was achieved through the US because of this. This is something, of course, that the Foreign Office of Pakistan has vehemently denied and said that there is no such agreement, and that previous reports also were denied by both Pakistan and Ukraine, and also that Pakistan is very clear on the fact that it maintains a neutral stance on the issue and it does not support anybody in part of this conflict, and this is something that Pakistan still stands by. So we're going to be taking a look at exactly how this publication is impacting the way that the situation in Pakistan is being perceived at the moment, and the fact that Pakistan's stance on Ukraine is that of maintaining neutrality, and this position is something that has been very clear in the beginning, so why there is a question mark that is being raised again and again on that. So that's going to be our focus in the second segment of the show today. For this and more, as always, in the studios, we've been joined by senior analyst Farrukh Pitafi and Faisal, and we've also been joined online for a discussion on our economic challenges by Dr. Aqdas Afzal, who's a senior economist, and Dr. Khaqan, Najeeb, also a senior economist. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being a part of the debate and talking to us. Let me start with you, Dr. Khaqan, because I want to understand what your take is on the way that the caretaker finance minister has posed the situation and talked about how it seems to be moving in a positive direction. I understand that people at large perhaps may not understand the economic nuances, but for many it seems that because of the increase in prices of petrol and electricity and of course other daily items, this is something that is adding to their woes, and they might be of the perspective that in fact the situation is worsening. But could you help explain our viewers what really is the case?
Sana, thank you for having me as always. So what is going on in the country right now is that we are trying to make sure that the illicit, irregular, the informal businesses, including hoarding, smuggling, and having store of value, a couple of things: dollar, bullion, gold, commodities. We are trying to make sure that this comes out and is moved more towards the formal economy. So we are trying to control these three things. These three things can only be controlled by administrative measures, by enforcement, by monitoring, by ensuring that people don't do these things. We have stronger vigilance. People call this a crackdown. I can't even seem to understand that this is simply asking the people doing an illicit business through a gray market of dollars and rupees in Pakistan to not do that, and the exchange companies to get more formalized as we take the exchange companies away from this, this B category and move them to A category, which is the more formal sector. We use the corporate banks to open the exchange companies. We ensure that the cross the border movement and the many things, including the Afghan transit trade, are more formalized and are not selling the goods that are not even needed in Afghanistan, which should pass through Pakistan and then be sold in Pakistan, like synthetic fiber, tea, electronics, electrical market. All these things which come and are sold in Pakistan then become part of the informal, or what I think is an illegal market, without paying taxes, hampering the development of our own small and medium enterprises, ensuring that there is a dollar demand that is created outside the formal interbank and the exchange companies open market or the curb market that we got. So I think this is the real operation that has actually happened and is happening right now is this. Similarly, the import of the Iranian oil, because that again is paid in dollars from these kind of markets, and this has hurt us. If you just see the July and August remittances in Pakistan, they have fallen to nearly $2 billion. In April 22, when there was a change of government, Pakistan's remittances were nearly $3 billion. So I think you've taken a great hit. These monies still come into Pakistan, but they come through the informal channels, and then a lot of these monies don't come to Pakistan because the hundi and the hawala system ensures that these payments stay outside of Pakistan. Similarly, exporters have held
Right,
their monies
absolutely.
abroad because the rupee was falling, so they were thinking maybe we'll get a better value. And that holding of the exports has also meant that our exports have been lower compared to last year. So we are trying to correct this phenomenon. A lot more can be done. Similarly, in the electricity sector, administrative action is being taken and a recovery of a couple of $1 billion has been done on the front of the people who are again causing us the T&D loss or not paying up their bills. So I think largely that is what we are trying to do, along with trying to get some investment through the SIFC and trying to make sure that our FBR performance stays on target with the setups that we have agreed with the IMF. The one good news that is coming through is the pickup in the cotton that we are seeing. For me, that's important because Pakistan, if we go back to 12.5 million bales this year, would save on the import of cotton and would help the export sector because we did give $2.5 billion in terms of financing at 1% to these guys to set up, machinery which has come. So hopefully that will come in. And I was thinking that the exports of textile would fall quite a bit, seeing the global and the local conditions. Maybe that fall would not be that harsh. I think that is the overall scenario in which Pakistan is operating. We must keep these actions abreast. We must ensure that FBR stays on target. Something that I haven't seen is the tightening of the expenditures or the expenditure reforms or something, reform on the PSDP or on the, other reforms, whether it's subsidy, and these have yet to be seen. I think that's the picture. PIA is in trouble, so we are trying to bail them out of the banks. Some monies have been given. There is a large guarantee that the government has already put up. So we are trying to bail them out in the sense of not bailing them by putting in more money, but keeping them afloat.
All right.
Have to take a very quick break. Let's go there. And when we come back, we are going to resume the discussion. Let's take a break. Welcome back. Before going to the break, we were discussing economic issues. At that time, I had to interrupt the transmission, but let me go back to Sana. Sana, over to you. Kindly resume the discussion.
Right, absolutely. And thank you, Farrukh, for that. We're going to be continuing our discussion on the economic situation. And I'll come to you, Dr. Aqdas Afzal, and understand the kind of analysis that Dr. Khaqan Najeeb was pointing towards. But I want to also understand that, of course, since the standby arrangement up till now, we're almost at the end of September, there have been a lot of instances where there was a lot of public outcry, especially in terms of the increase in bills and then petrol prices as well. And there are difficult times that the country is facing. But I want to know whether or not the kind of tough measures that are needed as part of the standby arrangement, we did achieve something positive in at least a direction that was needed, and that it does have an impact towards economic stability in the larger sense. Do you think that that at least has been done within this time frame? And secondly, with what Dr. Khaqan was also mentioning in terms of the expenditure reforms that are there, do you think that the kind of measures that need to be taken as part of the IMF standby arrangement will also be can also be complemented by curtailing our expenses, by limiting our losses, especially perhaps in the power sector, and taking actions and steps towards reducing any sort of costs that we have and improving our systems that can help us reserve our resources to an extent where they will have an impact in the more immediate term?
Thank you very much, Sana, for taking me on the show. Yes, I agree with the analysis presented here by Dr. Khaqan Najeeb. I think that was a very wholesome and a comprehensive analysis. I'll just add the following few points to what he's already said about the economy, or rather to his analysis. And I think the first and foremost task of the interim setup, or interim government that we have in Pakistan, is to hold free and fair elections, among other things. And those other things primarily are staying true and on course to the standby arrangement that has been inked with the IMF, because it appears at this moment that come February, for February or March, once a new government is in place, they are going to have to probably go back to the IMF for an extended fund facility. So I think focusing and staying on the path of the IMF standby arrangement is going to be very important. And then the IMF standby arrangement details 2, 3, 4 main things that have to be done by the interim government. I think the first, not in any particular order of importance, but I think they have to stay true to the target of primary surplus that has been agreed with the IMF, number one. For that, we are going to have to see some development, some progress when it comes to public finance reforms, as far as increasing the resource mobilization, resource envelope of Pakistan is concerned, which primarily means that we are going to have to tax more efficiently and probably try to bring in those sectors of the economy within the tax net which haven't been taxed fairly thus far. So I think that's one thing that needs to be done. Then the second thing that needs to be addressed has to do with tackling the large and huge size of the deficit or the circular debt in the energy sector. And I think that there have been some noises that have been made, but I have yet to see something concrete in the shape of potential privatization of 2 or 3 discos. Maybe in the months to come, we are going to see some discos on the privatization list. And finally, I think we have to focus on potential privatization of state-owned enterprises. And I have seen some progress, especially by this interim government, because they have now assigned this portfolio to a federal minister. So one hopes that there's going to be progress as far as that goal is concerned. I would also, however, add that whatever is happening in Pakistan is happening, not in isolation of what the global economy is going through. And if you look at the global economy or global economic trends, you would see some very challenging winds blowing in the world as we speak. I mean, there are only 2 or 3 economies, probably the US, Saudi Arabia, maybe even India, that are showing signs of growth. Rest of the countries, including European Union, even China, to a certain extent, are facing some very, very tough, or I should say challenging economic growth situation. So in this situation, when you have a general secular economic growth slowdown, you also have a very, very tight monetary policy situation in the world, with the US probably going to increase policy rate this week. We'll see whether that happens or not. The EU is definitely, the European Central Bank is definitely going to do it, as well as the central bank in Japan. So in this kind of a situation, what kind of issues that is going to create for the Pakistani currency? And finally, I think the biggest problem of them all is going to be the increasing price of oil in the international market, which has already seen a surge of 25% since May this year. The benchmark crude is already at around $95. So I think these are some very challenging situations in which the Pakistani economy finds itself situated, and it is going to require all the acumen and skill of our policymakers, our economic policymakers, to carve out a space for Pakistan's economy so that the least amount of burden is given on the shoulders of the most vulnerable sections of society. So I think that challenges are cut out.
Right,
and
absolutely.
I have seen some progress, but a lot of work still needs to be done.
Absolutely, and I want to focus on that. I'm glad you talked a little bit about that as well. Farrukh, when we take a look at the situation, there seems to be a lot of restrictions in the number of options available for Pakistan to act, to help itself economically. There's, of course, the global indicators and challenges that Dr. Aqdas was referring to. Then there's obviously the standby arrangement and its own conditions. And then, of course, the fact that there seems to be also a very limited time period and perhaps the space in which the caretaker setup will be able to act in the next few months. And so I want to understand that given all of these challenges, then where do we fit in the segment of society that is suffering the most, and that, of course, at the end is the responsibility of the state? How is it then that within this restrictive space we can act in ways that can help them? And if you can also help me understand how much space even exists for us to act for the betterment of the people.
Right, Sana, thank you very much for the chance. First things first, let me at the very outset say very honestly, it is very difficult, nearly impossible for me to improve upon the astute observations of 2 such accomplished economists like Dr. Aqdas Afzal and Dr. Khaqan Najeeb, but I will try to do my bit. I am a bit skeptical about the commentary about the global economic situation because we, of course, are reading from different commentaries. But regarding what Pakistan is going through, I think that at this moment, there is near consensus among political parties which actually understand economics of the country that the road to salvation is through the SBA and by cooperating with the IMF's program. That would mean that there is going to be economic distress, but then you can also fix the various economic dynamics of the fundamentals of the economy. Having said that, one aspect regarding what is happening right now is distress among the very lowest or the lowest rung of the country. So there was a program and there was allocation of BISP like a cash transfer for the very vulnerable of the society. I think that the caretaker setup will eventually move in that direction. Today I was reading that there is going to be similar kind of cash transfers to most vulnerable in the society. Having said that, all these crackdowns, all these surgeries, whether you call it a crackdown or whether you call it some kind of better governance, I would say that this essentially is going to have a positive impact on how dynamics are going to play out. But I agree with one aspect, our monetary policy at this moment, our interest rate, our policy rate stands at 22%. With that kind of interest rate, do you think that there is going to be any kind of economic growth? So essentially it is going to be fiscal belt tightening, it is going to be a reform, and with that kind of a situation in coming days, perhaps we will get more fiscal space, but for now it is essentially a policy of reform and we have to carry it out. And caretaker setup or not, remember that while political parties all in principle agree on this path, you will see that there is a lot of expediency and point scoring. Everybody keeps on blaming the other, but the fact is the economy of the country broke in 76 years, not in 2 years, not in 3 years, not in 5 or 10 years. It has been an outcome of our bad and blind policies. So now we have to look at whether there is a possibility of offloading of public assets, the public sector enterprises. If that happens, things are going to even look better. Sana.
All right, Faisal, the situation, when we take a look at what has been said about the caretaker government, is also pointing towards the fact that they of course have their own plan in terms of the kind of changes that we're going to be seeing within the political domain of the country as well, including elections of course, and that also comes with its own cost, which the government says it is prepared for, and there is a budget allocated for that. But do you think that this will be a smooth ride financially speaking, and will not have its accompanying economic challenges for the country?
Sana, first of all, obviously earlier Dr. Aqdas highlighted a very good point that the interim setup is in place. The first and foremost thing, of course, they have to look into is to obviously hold the elections in time and prescribed time so that the system can get back on track, and I'm talking about the democratic system. I'll simply give one example that during the weekend, of course, both the weekend nights I went out, and while I was driving out, I could hardly see, the number of vehicles. They were very less on the roads, which obviously it is an indication that the biggest toll on the budgets of the individual budgets of the households, they are obviously burdened by the petroleum prices. And
can you name the roads, because I think that you haven't gone to Munal or some place like that.
No, I haven't been there, but I'm just talking about the inside Islamabad.
Okay.
And it was quite shocking for me that on the restaurants, the people were not present at the restaurants. It felt like people had their dinner at home and they came out only for the tea stalls, and they were enjoying the teas, which means that they have contained themselves and shifted themselves from more expensive hotels to just the tea stalls, because it is easier to get it from there. Why I'm mentioning this, it is obviously coming out straight from the road, straight from our society. People are trying to save money. People are so bothered with the petroleum prices right now because movement of the people is very confined, and they are not free in terms of making their choices. Oh, we're going to that restaurant, we're going to do this. So buying power of the people is hurt when it comes to our domestic economy, which would obviously eventually will see that businesses, they would get affected by it, and then eventually people who are working or attached to that business, they will go jobless. So this is the ground situation. Now coming towards how to fix this. Of course, the government, the current interim government is trying its best, and they have been very successful in terms of obviously capping on the smuggling and then corruption. all of these aspects, they are going to be very fruitful for our economic situation in coming days. And of course, we are attracting FDIs as well. But here I want to mention a very important thing, and that is that when we talk about the FDIs, we always expect the overseas Pakistanis to be generous enough and of course invest in Pakistan. At this time, of course, we know that we have precedents set in our political fabric as well, that so many of the politicians, big or small, they are of course the ones who have investments all over the world. They will be requested that in the larger interest of the country, of course, they need to bring their own money back to the country as well and invest in this country. Whatever the kind of money they have, they need to bring it in and invest in Pakistan, so that somehow that money gets back to Pakistan, and the jobs which are created out of their money, they can of course benefit Pakistan itself. And earlier we were talking about the more tax for special sectors. One of the sectors which gets very less taxed is of course real estate, and there they have the money. Anybody who's somehow attached with the or knows the real estate sector of Pakistan, of course they know that they have hefty amounts there. That sector needs to be taxed because they can afford it. And at this hour, I think they need to think about it as well.
Right, absolutely. Farrukh, I think the reason Faisal saw a large number of people at tea stalls is because that's the only place he actually also hangs out. So that's where we'll find him. But anyway, let me come to you, Dr. Khaqan. The situation, of course, with reference to investment coming in is something that's really important, for which, of course, an important body such as the SIFC was established. And I understand that there have been long-term announcements that have been made, which are very promising and encouraging. But I want to know whether, since its establishment, the SIFC has contributed to something with reference to our current economic challenges, and is able to actually move forward in a way that that ensures us that this is something that will benefit us and can bring in money and change the situation. And secondly, I want to also understand then whether programs such as the BISP, which may be a great mechanism, will be able to cater to the vast amount and scale of suffering that the people are going through at the moment, especially with the increase in petrol and electricity prices, and then now, of course, the issues of gas in winter, and how exactly will that sort of damage be covered through mechanisms such as the BISP, and whether more innovative ways that we've earlier also proposed to the IMF can also be thought over and can help in the situation.
So let me take the second question first, since that's kind of the continuity of the discussion that we were having. So I think there are two ways to ride out this difficult time for the people of Pakistan. There are no two thoughts about it, that the middle income earner, the low income earner, and the people who are vulnerable are suffering. So we should have great care in making our choices from here. One, I think the income support program reaches about 9.3 million to 10 million households now. So it is a big chunk of people that we reach. I think one idea that I've always said is that the very low income earners that we reach, maybe a million out of them on the point table who are the lowest, can have some kind of energy support program or something. I think it will cost a few billion rupees. If we can talk to the fund, I think that's some idea that we should discuss so that there can be some help there. I'm not going to say this will bring them out of the energy crisis. Secondly, I think we must move on the manner at the lowest by taking those fuels which do produce and not a bit of extra care in terms of not using the generation that is heavier on the price. So that is another thing that we can do. But on the energy sector, the caretakers must take the steps that are needed. The subsidy reform, the reform of the pricing, the reform of captive gas, the reform of taking gas away from the fluent areas, all the ideas, so that in the next year, 2, 3 years, the per unit cost can at least be stabilized somewhere. The other thing that the people can
All
themselves
right,
do is
Dr.
also very
Aqdas.
important. Just 1 second.
Right,
So
I'll
I'm
move
just
on
going
to
to
Dr. Aqdas
say,
quickly in terms of the. Yes, continue, Dr. Khaqan. Complete your thought.
just last point, I think the people themselves have to reduce their bills by doing energy efficient appliances, doing natural lighting, shutting up their electronics when they are not using LED bulbs, moving away from air conditioners, insulating their home, take advantage of the off peak rates. These are some things that we haven't been able to advocate from the government side, I think. So those are the things that the people can do themselves.
All right, last question, Dr. Aqdas. I also want to understand your perspective on the introduction of digital currency in Pakistan, and how do you think that this transition is going to be achieved? How exactly should it be planned and implemented? And then what sort of complications we potentially can be dealing with, and whether or not in the longer run this may be something that is the right step and will be beneficial for our economic challenges?
Thank you very much for that very interesting question. I've been reading about the state bank's different initiatives that they are coming up with, and they have now they've announced that they are going to be coming out with a digital currency. I've been following digital currencies for at least a couple of years. When I think about a year and a half ago, the People's Bank of China first decided to experiment with digital currency, when they decided to give a certain amount of money to every single citizen in China on the occasion of the Chinese New Year. So that's when I really started following what does it mean to have a digital currency. Digital currency is a very interesting idea. Now, there are different types of digital currencies. I mean, we are basically not talking about Bitcoins or Dogecoins or what have you. We are talking about fiat currencies that are going to be available to people probably in their smart devices. So I think it's a very interesting idea. It is going to reduce the cost of printing money, however high that is. But I think it also offers a number of potential pitfalls. And I would really hope that the State Bank of Pakistan has done its SWOT analysis, because I don't know how strong their cybersecurity infrastructure is, because if there is some kind of hacking attack on the State Bank of Pakistan, what is that going to mean? How is the money going to disappear? What have you? And also, what percentage of Pakistani people have access to a smartphone? So, I mean, at the end of the day, who is going to be able to take advantage of these digital currencies that the State Bank of Pakistan is going to issue? Who are they going to issue this to? For example, they could be issuing 20% of all public sector salaries in the form of a digital currency. So these are some very interesting scenarios that I think need more attention, more debate. But certainly I welcome the initiative, because it shows that the State Bank of Pakistan is really on the top of its game. They are aware of different developments.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Aqdas Afzal, for that input, and of course for outlining us the kind of measures and nuances that exist within the introduction of digital currency. And we'll talk more about that in further detail in other shows as well. And we also, of course, hope that the groundwork that the State Bank claims has been done has taken cognizance of all of these measures. And thank you very much, Dr. Khaqan Najeeb, for also joining us and being part of the debate and giving us your insight regarding the economic situation in the country. We're now going to be quickly also moving to our next segment, which takes a look at the report that talks about and allegedly claims that Pakistan entered into an arms agreement to provide arms to Ukraine, and in return got the IMF standby arrangement. Let's take a look at this through this report, and we'll talk about that in more detail.
Pakistan has vehemently denied allegations of a secret arms deals with Ukraine in exchange for an IMF bailout, emphasizing its commitment to a policy of strict neutrality in global conflicts. The controversy erupted on 17 September after a report by The Intercept, a private US publication, claimed that Pakistan had supplied weapons to Ukraine through the US to secure the IMF deal. The report allegedly referenced some documents from both Pakistani and American sources and the testimony of insiders. The Intercept report also hinted at the economic and political consequences of this alleged arms deal, raising concerns about Pakistan's democracy and its involvement in a foreign war. Pakistan's official response, delivered by the Foreign Office spokesperson Mumtaz Zahra Baloch, dismissed the claims as baseless and fabricated. Baloch emphasized that the IMF bailout was negotiated to implement essential economic reforms and that Pakistan maintained a strict policy of neutrality in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Additionally, in July 2023, the Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba made his maiden trip to Pakistan. Both nations denied making any agreements that would have allowed Pakistan to provide Ukraine with weapons in the event of a Russian invasion during the visit.
Well, you saw the report, which of course outlines what has been talked about in The Intercept, that claims that Pakistan entered this agreement to provide arms to Ukraine. And Faisal, I want to take your stance on this because, of course, the Foreign Office has denied it. Pakistan had denied it earlier as well, and it's very clear about its neutral stance. Why is it then that such reports are coming out?
Sana, if we look at, of course, the propaganda, it has been going on since almost 10 months now that Pakistan has sold a few of the rockets and a few of the arms to the Ukrainians. And of course, there were a few footages as well, whom we can call them concocted footages. So it is mere propaganda, which is taken by, of course, The Intercept right now. And of course, we can go through the statement which came out from our Foreign Office today, and it is a good initiative that it came out, because Pakistan has maintained neutrality since last year when, of course, this war started, and it is somehow being attached to IMF's deal. It has nothing to do with it, because IMF deal, the talks between obviously both of the parties, they were going on since a long time, and we know that Pakistan has achieved the obviously the requirements Pakistan has met, which were required by the IMF. That's how we got it. It's not that we just simply on somebody else's indications, we've simply gone in the war and sold our arms, and that's how we got it. It has nothing to do with it, and of course Pakistan is still neutral. Yes, there are few contracts which Pakistan has over the year maintained. I'm talking about the defense contracts, which are the peacetime contracts with for the defensive natured all of the weapons. They are always traded. Pakistan buys from different countries, and yes, there are a few of the arms which go out from Pakistan side as well, and they are already known. And that is how, by the way, there are a few of the tanks I won't name which are with Pakistan of the Russian made, but they came to Pakistan through Ukraine, because Ukraine had them and we bought them from them, and that was before the war even initiated. So peacetime contracts, of course, they do exist and all, but saying this that...
All right, and Faisal, I understand that, and of course the Foreign Office has also clarified Pakistan's stance on this, but Farrukh, I want to understand how damaging is a publication such as that of The Intercept that talks about how it has also gone to sources and verified and authenticated the documents and then come forward with this stance. However much Pakistan denies it, what sort of damaging effect exists through this publication? And also in terms of the steps forward for anything to be published that's outrightly false, what can or should be done about it?
Right, Sana, I think that number one, it is a free world. So Pakistan cannot censor any foreign publications. I think people will keep on doing what they are doing. But frankly, when you call it propaganda, you have to remember that the whole story actually fails the basic test of rationality. Why am I saying this? On one side, you have to look at how Ukraine is fighting the war. Ukraine is procuring weapons from America, which are actually state-of-the-art weapon system, and similarly, they are also procuring F-16s and better, airships and all that from various European countries. So what exactly is the value addition that Pakistan can offer, right? Now, I don't think that there is such a slam dunk case or Pakistan offering something that might actually change the direction of the war itself. So I don't think that it stands to reason that there is any such deal. Secondly, the story implies that there is this spooky little conspiracy that Pakistan is selling weapons to another country, and then Pakistan will be smart enough to actually write it down on paper. Amazing. Then the next thing that you have to look at is when you are talking about this agreement, you have to look at IMF's remit, and you have to realize that IMF does not deal in weaponry, right?
Yeah.
And had Pakistan actually sold its soul, then perhaps Pakistan could have gotten a better deal. At this moment, the entire country is struggling with the economy, and we are being told that Pakistan is getting whatever breathing space because Pakistan is sending weapon to a country where the other party is so strong that we have been trying to boo the other party for quite some time. Ukraine, make no mistakes, Ukraine is a very important partner with Pakistan. We have been importing engines of Al-Khalid tank for a decade, I think, more than a decade. But having said that, that was peacetime effort. Right now, I don't think this story stands a chance or any kind of test of reason. And because of that, we don't have to worry, because when you talk about the other countries, Russia and others, I think they cannot be, they are not kids. They will not actually buy this. So Pakistan doesn't have to worry. All we needed to do was actually make the statement, and I'm glad that Foreign Office has done it.
Sana. And Sana,
all right, absolutely. Thank you very much, Farrukh, and thank you, Faisal. Thank you very much, Faisal. We're almost out of time, but thank you for joining us and, of course, being part of the debate. That's all that we have from the show. We'll now see you tomorrow.